It's getting warmer every day where I live, and as this happens, it seems like a lot of the clothes in the store get smaller and smaller. And I totally get the premise of this. 100%. I want to stay cool in the summertime too. If you're like me and you don't want to be showing your skin to everybody, then this can pose a problem. But the awesome thing is that we're crocheters and we can solve this problem. There's a good chance we probably already have all the supplies even. So let's get into it. Let's talk about how we can use crochet to help our clothes be a little more modest. I know sometimes the term modesty can be like a charged term, and there's a lot of reasons why or why not someone does or doesn't want to wear more modest clothes. For me, a lot of it is like a sensory type of issue. I just don't feel super comfortable having all of my skin out in the elements. I don't like when I sit down on a chair and too much of my leg is touching the chair and then I go to get up and I just don't like that feeling. I work in a customer service job and I'm sitting at a desk and people walk up to the counter. So their eyes are a lot higher and I don't like a lot of skin here showing either. Like I just don't want people that come into my work seeing all that. Whether you want your clothes to be a little more modest just due to personal reasons or sensory reasons, or it can obviously be religious reasons as well. I think it's important for us to realize we have an opportunity to take commercially made clothes and personalize them with things we're already doing anyway, with supplies we already have, and make them modest in a way that fits our lifestyle and what our preferences are. I want to put a quick disclaimer in here and say that this video is not meant to debate modesty. It is not in any way to promote or to criticize or anything like that. So please be kind to myself and other people in the comments if this isn't something that you're interested in or if this isn't something you value. Like, that's totally cool too. I'm not saying you need to be that way. I think a couple of the obvious ways we can use crochet to be a little more modest is going to be things like wearing cardigans. This is not a crocheted cardigan. This is a commercially made cardigan. I've done some hexagon cardies, and obviously that's going to be a great way just to throw something on and have it, cover our arms, give us just a little more coverage. Maybe the top we're wearing, we're just not comfortable with how form-fitting the top might be, but that cardigan can give us like that extra layer right there. So obviously that's going to be a great way. And while cardigan isn't super simple to make, it's a super simple way to make an outfit a little more modest. Obviously a shawl is going to be something great where if, wanting just to have something to wrap around, if that's something where, maybe you wanted to be a little bit more modest while you're traveling or something, but then once you're in a restaurant, you're more comfortable taking that off. That is a great way. And I know a lot of people have made really beautiful dressy shawls to wear to weddings and things like that, where if you're at the ceremony in a church and you want to have, your arms, your back covered more, but then once you get to the reception and, it's generally darker, you're usually dancing, it's warm, and you want a little bit more freedom and it's a little more casual than being in a church, a shawl is a great way to have that again, where the first place you need to be dressy or the second you don't. Same way with little capelets. And I think I'm using the term right. A capelet is kind of like a tiny poncho, if I'm correct. The ones I have seen have been all a little bit lacy. So again, a great opportunity if you are somewhere a little bit more formal and your dress or your top might have spaghetti straps and you still want to be cool, but you want just a little bit more coverage. A little lacy capelet can give that to you, almost like having sleeves there. So right off the bat, those are all very easy patterns to find. And a poncho is another great option as well. A poncho might not be as dressy as a capelet or something like that, but it is a great way to, throw on an extra layer. And you can make those, very lacy, or they can be quite thick as well. So depending on what you're looking for, I know for this summer, I'm looking at doing some kind of lacier mesh type ponchos where, if I just want to hang out with some of my friends and maybe we're having like a bonfire or, something like that where it's going to be hot, maybe a little muggy. I might want to wear a tank top, but I don't really just like the look of a plain tank top, and definitely too hot for something like this, then I think like a mesh type poncho is a great way to, still get the airflow through there. It still be super casual, but just give me a little bit more coverage up top where I want it. But if we're going to be taking just any random pieces of clothes we might have, or we might be purchasing and we really like the item, but there's generally a few areas of concern, I think, when we're looking at areas that just aren't quite as modest. So obviously that's going to be neckline is probably the number one, and then hemline and sleeves. So the awesome thing is these are all things that are going to be pretty easy for us to just zhuzh up a little bit and add something to, and not really use that much as far as yarn or time or resources to make it something that we can really feel comfortable wearing. With these things, you're going to be looking at adding trim to it. And there are tons and tons of different crochet trims. And you might also have some good luck if you're searching on YouTube for like crochet border, crochet trim. These are going to be words they use. And a lot of times people are looking for them for blankets, but we don't have to be using the same yarn that we use for blanket. And I'll get into that a little bit later in the video, but search through some of those, and I will put in the description box a few different links to channels that I think have really great or like have a lot of trim or borders on their channel. And I would suggest looking at something when you're looking at these trims for something that kind of mimics if we're talking about necklines, that mimics the neckline a little bit. If it is a scoop or a scallop, maybe putting a scallop or something more round and soft in there is going to be beneficial. If it's a V, you might want to look at doing something a little more geometric. Obviously, it's impossible to say in this video what's going to look best on a particular piece. That's something you really need to take into consideration with all of the design elements of that piece. Or if you're going to be adding crochet to more than one area of the garment, you want them to all coordinate. And real quick before I go on, let's touch a little bit on sleeve. So dealing with spaghetti straps would be a little bit trickier, and that's maybe more where the capelet or the poncho or something like that might come in handy more. But if you're dealing with like a regular tank with regular sleeves, I have seen numerous videos, and I'm just going to link one that I can think of off the top of my head, and it's by Nastasia, for adding some sleeves. But again, that is a very simple YouTube search, is just how to add crochet sleeves to a shirt. And I'm sure there's quite a bit that is going to pop up. So what do we need to have a really cohesive feel with the modifications we're making to this garment? We need to look at the fabric, we need to look at the color, we need to look at the structure, and we need to look at the print if there's a print. So color, I would suggest when making modifications to your garment, let's, for the sake of this video, say we're talking about a dress, just so we can kind of touch a little bit on the different things. But obviously, as you know, this could be a top, this could be a skirt, whatever. So if we've got a dress and it is black, pretty safe to say most everybody has had one of those. And maybe the neckline comes down just a little bit too far, and maybe the hemline is just a little bit too short. With this black dress, for me, I would probably go with I would probably go with black yarn or a very dark yarn. I'm probably not going to want to add a lot of contrast to this piece if the dress is completely black. Just in the aspect of, I don't necessarily want those modifications to come screaming out at you. Hey, I changed this dress and altered it so you can't see my cleavage. Like, that's not what I'm trying to tell the world. Like, I just want to go about my business and not have you see down my top. I don't think that's asking for too much. For me personally, I'm not going to want something that contrasts. I'm probably going to pick like black, or maybe like a black sparkle, or like maybe a really super dark charcoal gray, something that really goes with it and doesn't look like it's an obvious modification. If you're wanting to maybe have a little bit more contrast, what I would suggest doing is making sure that you carry those design elements through the whole piece. So if we're doing something with a little more contrast on the neckline, make sure we do the same thing down at the hemline, and then maybe add some appliques to it. Maybe at the waistband, add in attach some trim or something right there too, so that is going through the entire piece and doesn't just look like a mod that you put on there, and that it is actually something incorporated into the entire garment. So when we're talking about the fabric and we're talking about the stretch and the construction of the fabric, it is very important that we are matching up what the yarn is going to be with the garment. Number one, I will say, as much as I love a 4-weight acrylic yarn, I'm probably not going to be using a 4-weight acrylic yarn on any modifications I make to my clothes, because as much as I love yarn, I think it's going to look a little too yarny for it. I am going to want to invest or use one of my yarns that is a little more upscale. But the good news is there are so many choices for this. So one important factor is going to be how much stretch there is in this garment versus what you're putting on there. And traditionally, cotton isn't known to have a lot of stretch to it, but it is great for garments. I'm just going to grab this drop saffron I have here, and this is 100% cotton, and it is a really nice looking yarn. They have gorgeous colors in this collection. It is fine weight, and I think the finer weight is going to help that piece look a little more sophisticated and more intentional to it. But this yarn has zero stretch at all. So I'm not really going to want to put it on an item that, like this, where it's got, I wouldn't put it on this anyway, but, where it's got a ton of stretch. But my skirt that I'm wearing here, my skirt is 100% polyester. And, this isn't one I would put on here with this color, but this doesn't really have any stretch. So that would be a good pairing for that, because it's not going to need to stretch. If you're having to pull something over your head and the yarn does not stretch, that is a huge problem. So definitely keep that in mind and try to keep the like texture with the like texture, and it is going to make the garment look more seamless, more intentional, and it's going to make it easier for you to wear as well. And like I said, if you're adding it in places that need stretch, it is definitely a must. Another reason you're going to want to use a like yarn with a like fabric is going to be for washing instructions. For me, I'm not putting a lot of my clothes in the dryer as well, because I don't want them to shrink. I want them to last longer. And a lot of the fabrics I have aren't super dryer friendly anyway. And if you're a person who, like me, I don't like that feeling of being constricted. Again, I said I have a lot of sensory issues with my clothes. I want to feel like I can still move. I don't want to feel like I'm being pulled, in the armpits or in the waist or anything like that. So I want to make sure that I don't have a trim or something on my garment that is going to shrink up a lot and look very bizarre on a dress that didn't shrink, if that makes sense. Like, it's going to be very obvious if you have added a trim at the hemline of your dress and it is all tight and shrunken and the rest of your dress is now no longer flowy because it's been sucked in. Same way if you add it to your neckline and all of a sudden this is all puckered up around here because the neckline shrunk. And just why make it harder on yourself than it needs to be? You know, if you know that dress is going in the washer and dryer, do not put 100% cotton for the trim. Look and make sure you read the labels. Make sure that the yarn you're putting on there can hold up to what you're going to put that dress through. Same thing goes kind of on the opposite end. If that garment is dry clean only, make sure on the label that that yarn is able to be dry clean, because not all of them are. And then if your dress has a print to it, I would say, again, this kind of goes back to the design elements, but I would try to, and I would encourage you to look at what that print is. And when you're deciding what type of crochet border to put on there, to look at that. You know, if it's a beautiful floral, I would look for something that's definitely like soft and flowy. If your dress is very geometric, that might be something great to, you know, put like a window stitch or something very geometric on there. It is a great time to really look at the design elements and see how we can embellish that in a way that really brings out the elements of that print and pairs really seamlessly with it. I would say stay away from anything that might just look too much like, you know, like a simple double crochet. I would probably steer away from anything too simple. So it's not as if this isn't a beginner project, but I would say you want to be looking for something that's a little more intermediate skill level, something that is a little more lace-like, something that has more details into it, something that has a little more design elements than just a row or two of double crochet. I think that by doing that, it's going to ultimately look a little more handmade, a little more altered, a little more modified, and less seamless and less intentional. If that's all you're able to do, that's still definitely better than feeling uncomfortable wearing something that's too short for you. For sure. And if you're not used to those type of stitches and patterns, practice it before you put it on the garment. You know, there is nothing wrong with trying it out. It's also not a bad idea to make up a small section of this trim and just hold it up to the garment and make sure you still like it together. Make sure it's what you thought it was. Make sure the colors really go in the proportions that it will be on there. If you're like, that's all fine and dandy, but how do I get it on my garment? There's a couple ways we can do this. So the first way is going to be by making holes in your garment. You can do this a couple different ways. You can actually, and again, I know I'm using this as an example. I'm not going to be putting anything on this really high t-shirt. You can either use a skip blade on a rotary cutter to cut, I think it's like, is it 1/4 inch holes or, you know, like there, into the project, and then go ahead and crochet through those. Or you can use a needle and thread and go ahead and add that in, and then you get that stitch and you can go ahead and start crocheting into that stitch, you know, make that baseline and then go ahead and add the crochet trim to it. Or you can make the trim in the length you need, just crocheting it, and you can hand sew it on there. Depending on the fabric and the yarn, you might be able to machine sew it if you're comfortable with that. But for the sake of video, I'm going to suggest that you hand sew it on there. So that is going to involve a little more measuring, and it'll involve a little more preparation to do it, but I think you're going to have a more finished look by doing it that way. When you've added it directly to the piece, you're going to have those beginning stitches from where you put the holes in. And for some things, like if it's definitely a more casual type look, that might be totally fine and you might like how that looks. But if it's a dressier piece, you might not want that on there. And I would also encourage you, if you are opting for a little more contrast, then I would definitely steer more clear of having those initial stitches and going in and just sewing it onto the piece so that it looks more like a finished piece you would buy at the store. This can be a great opportunity to really go through some of your drawers, your closet, and look at a few of the pieces that you haven't worn for a while and see if that's one of the reasons why you're not wearing it. Is it a little too short? Is it revealing a little too much? And can you make a few simple changes and have that piece be something you actually enjoy from here on out? Sometimes I feel crazy when I'm in a store and I'm looking at all of the clothes and I just think, wow, when did I get so old? Why is everything so short? I don't know if you have felt that way at all either, but again, I know a lot of this is just personal preference. And again, I don't want anyone to ever think that I am trying to tell you how you should dress. I want you to feel as comfortable as you can in the clothes you have. I hope this video has gotten the creative juices going for you. I know I am going to be looking through my closet. And even though I have the past few years been really being more conscientious about what I'm purchasing and not bringing it home if it's going to be a problem for me, I know there's some things hiding out in my closet that I think I can switch up a little bit. Thank you so much for letting me talk yarn with you again today. Bye.